Hey, you awake? If so, get out of the hospital quick, you useless wife. An unfamiliar man suddenly yelled at me, just as I was waking up.
Excuse me, who are you? Are you sure you got the right person?
Upon hearing my words, the man seemed taken aback for a moment, but then quickly smirked. Huh? Who the heck is this guy? Gives me the creeps.
If you don't remember, that's fine. Just hurry up and get back home, useless wife.
With a nasty remark and an unsettling grin, the man left the room. What on earth happened to me? Today, I want you to hear about the worst day of my life from 2 years ago. My name is Hazel Thompson. A divorced 32-year-old. 2 years prior, at the age of 30, I woke up in a hospital bed. Waking up, I was surrounded by an eerie feeling. Because I couldn't understand why I was in such a place. Why was I lying in a hospital bed? What on earth happened to me? No matter how hard I tried to recall, I couldn't remember anything before falling asleep. When I tried to sit up, a sharp pain shot through my head.
Ouch!
I touched my head and felt a bandage. Did I hurt my head? But why? Since waking up, my mind was filled with questions. While I was still confused, a man approached me.
Hey! You awake? If so, get out of here quick, you useless wife.
He glared at me and suddenly shouted.
Excuse me, who are you? You sure you got the right person?
I didn't recognize the man and hesitantly spoke to him. My words made the man's eyes widen in surprise. He looked really mad, maybe he confused me with someone else. I gave the man a friendly smile, hoping he'd realize his mistake and move on. That's what I thought. But instead of leaving, he looked at me with a puzzled expression and started asking like, do you not remember? Don't you know why you're here? I nodded honestly, and he smirked eerily and was like, if you don't remember, I guess that's fine. If that's the case, no worries. Just hurry back home, you useless wife. Then he kicked my bed and stormed out of the room. Huh? Who was that guy? Creepy, right? He definitely mistook me for someone else. But boy, he sure acted like he owned the place. If he's someone's husband, that's just terrible. Lost in these thoughts, my mother entered the room, as if swapping places with the man.
Hazel! You're awake! Thank goodness!
Tears filled her eyes as she rushed to me.
Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you. I'm okay. But just before you came in, some weird guy was here and he yelled at me. I think he confused me with someone else. Is everything all right?
As I said this, my mother tilted her head and was like, huh? The guy who just left was Kyle, wasn't he? Did someone come in before Kyle?
Kyle? Who's that? Who? Your husband. No way, Mom. Stop joking. What are you talking about? Just wait a second. Hazel, are you serious? Didn't you get married last year? You came to tell me how happy you were to get married before turning 30. Don't you remember? Mom, what are you talking about? I'm only 28. What do you mean before turning 30?
Upon hearing this, my mother rushed out of the room in panic. Soon, doctors and nurses came rushing in, and I underwent various tests. I was later diagnosed with amnesia due to a severe head injury. It turned out I hadn't lost all my memories but had forgotten about the last 2 years since I met my husband, Kyle. It seems I've lost my memories from the age of 28 to 30. Which meant the man who had yelled at me earlier, Kyle, was indeed my husband. Kyle had yelled at me without showing any concern after I woke up. I wondered why I had married such a man. The next day, in the afternoon, the same man, supposedly my husband Kyle, visited the room. This time, he was accompanied by an older woman. Is this woman also someone I know? While I pondered that, she was like, look at that, you're already up. How long were you planning on lounging around? Just like Kyle, instead of showing concern, she snapped at me.
Excuse me, but who are you?
Upon hearing my question, she looked surprised but retorted like, wow, just like Kyle said, you really don't know me?
I'm so sorry, I don't recognize you or the man from earlier either.
Just like Kyle did yesterday, she smirked and was like, well, that's convenient. Kyle, you played your cards right. What did she mean by played your cards right? When I looked puzzled, Kyle explained like you're my wife, and this is my mother. Got it? Apparently, this woman was his mother. In other words, my mother-in-law.
By the way, it's just a little injury, right? How long are you planning on staying in the hospital? Who's gonna cook our meals? And there's a pile of laundry. Hurry up and come home.
Then, joining in, my mother-in-law exclaimed like that's right. Do you know how much this hospital stay is gonna cost? And what about work? You've been missing out, but the pay's still coming in, right? Kyle and my mother-in-law kept nagging and blaming me. But when my mother came to visit, their attitude changed drastically.
Hazel, how are you feeling? Oh, you guys are here too. It seems Hazel has lost her memory from the time she met Kyle.
Addressing the in-laws, my mother's voice trailed off. My mother-in-law was quickly like she hit her head, right? At least she looks okay. That's a relief. My mother-in-law hurriedly added like, well, we'll be off then. They hurriedly left. I asked my mother like, did I really marry that man?
Yes. Kyle has always taken great care of you, and your mother-in-law was kind too. After getting married, you moved to the Thompsons' family home. Then, until yesterday, we didn't hear anything from you. Out of the blue, we were told you had an accident. What's been going on? Why didn't you contact us? No, Mom, that's what I'm saying. I don't remember anything. What happened?
I replied with a laugh, but I couldn't shake off the unease. The Kyle and mother-in-law I met after losing my memory were nothing like the caring and kind people my mother described. Their attitude had completely changed once my mother arrived. They seemed more concerned about house chores and money than me. Wait. Money? That reminds me, what's happening with my job?
Mom, speaking of which, I'm still continuing my work as a tax consultant, right?
You're still working there. Mr. Johnson was concerned and said you should take it easy for now. After graduating from college, I acquired my CPA license. I got a job at Johnson's CPA firm. That's a relief. I'm still continuing with my job. But wait. Right now, it should be the middle of a weekday. My mother is a stay-at-home mother, and I've been given time off from the CPA office to recover. But what about those two? They came to the hospital, but aren't they working? The more I thought about Kyle and my mother-in-law, the more suspicious I became. And it wasn't just me. My mother, seeing my behavior, started to become suspicious of Kyle and his mother as well. Then the next day, I still couldn't recall my memories. Kyle and his mom visited the hospital again in the afternoon.
Hey, Hazel. Enough is enough. At first, I thought it was okay if you lost your memories, but how long are you gonna stay here? I've been telling you to come home and take care of me.
Before the accident, how did I handle such harsh words from Kyle? But thinking about it, there's nothing I can do since I can't remember.
No matter what you say, I don't remember you. I don't want to live with someone I don't know. Besides, I'm still receiving treatment. Why don't you take care of yourself? You're an adult, right?
I boldly said that to Kyle. He then grabbed me by the collar, his face turning bright red, and was like, you trying to defy me? I did you a favor by marrying a slowpoke like you. No one will want you if I leave you. His mother, my mother-in-law, chided Kyle like, didn't we agree you wouldn't raise your hand outside? While saying that, she was like, Kyle's right. We're putting up with a klutz like you. All you need to do is earn money and take care of us. Suddenly acting defiant and being cocky. Being hospitalized and wasting money. Whether it was from being grabbed by the collar or from their confrontation, a dull pain like I was hit with a blunt object ran through my head. Then, I remembered everything. It felt like a fog lifting from my mind, and everything became clear. From meeting Kyle to our married life, and why I had the accident. I remembered everything. But I couldn't let those two know that I regained my memory. Pretending to still have amnesia, I was like, stop it. I might not remember how I was before, but I'll call the police, okay? Upon hearing this, Kyle let go of me, and my mother-in-law angrily remarked, like, you ungrateful wife. Don't get carried away. But again, their attitude changed dramatically as soon as my mother appeared.
Oh, hey. You've been visiting every day, haven't you?
With a forced smile, my mother-in-law addressed my mother. Today, a counselor also joined my mother. Apparently, there was going to be a discussion with Kyle, my mother-in-law, and my mother to help retrieve my memories. Though my memory had already returned, this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without letting the counselor know I had remembered, we began the session. Kyle and my mother-in-law insisted there was no pressing need for me to force my memories back. And just like that, their attitude changed completely from just moments ago. Kyle spoke with a bright smile, detailing how harmoniously we had lived as a married couple up until now. My mother-in-law enthusiastically recounted how we lived like a real mother and daughter. Where did these two learn to act so convincingly? Their tales seemed so fabricated, it was clear they were enjoying spinning their web of lies. Hearing their stories, I couldn't help but frown. My mother, sensing something amiss, made eye contact with me. I felt sorry for the counselor, but when I asked if I could pose a question, she encouraged me to ask whatever I was curious about. I then asked Kyle and my mother-in-law, like, have I always been a terrible wife? The counselor exclaimed in shock, like, a terrible wife? She exclaimed in surprise. My mother-in-law quickly retorted, like, Hazel, what are you talking about? What's gotten into you all of a sudden?
Huh? Didn't you guys keep calling me a useless wife and klutz just yesterday and today? Oh my, we never said that. Are you sure you didn't mishear? But you've been telling me to hurry home and do the chores, calling me a useless wife, and saying things like you're putting up with someone as useless as me, right? Am I being bullied by you?
Upon saying this, my mother-in-law, drenched in sweat, interjected, like, Hazel, stop it. That's not true. My husband was like, that's right, Hazel and Mom always got along really well. The two of them were visibly flustered. Far more than you'd expect if they really had a close relationship. I remember everything now. From our marriage up until the accident, they always burdened me with all the household chores. On top of that, my mother-in-law used to take most of my salary, claiming it was for living expenses. Facing Kyle, I inquired, like, by the way, Kyle, what do you do for a living?
Huh?
He hesitated to respond.
I've been working at the accounting firm and doing all the housework, right? That means you must be so busy you can't do housework. Yet you come to the hospital every day at noon. What exactly are you doing? I took some time off from work because I was worried about you. Really? So, what's your job? That's none of your business right now.
Kyle was becoming increasingly agitated.
Shouldn't we be discussing everything openly during counseling?
I looked to the counselor for support, and she gave Kyle a curious glance. Kyle, turning a deep shade of red, declared, like, I'm currently out of work. What's wrong with that? He shouted back defiantly.
So, you're unemployed then? Does that mean your mother works?
When I asked that, my mother-in-law stammered, like me. I am. Now, my mother-in-law began to get flustered.
So, you're unemployed too? What? In our time, it was common for women to stay at home and look after the house. Your mother did the same thing. What's wrong with that?
I could see their true colors as their temper flared.
No one's saying being unemployed is a bad thing. But if that's the case, why was I doing all the housework even though I was working? Especially when both of you and Kyle had the time to share the chores. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Getting increasingly frustrated, my mother-in-law snapped, like, what are you trying to say? It's a given for a wife to do house chores.
But you two were living off the money I earned, right? Isn't that a bit much? You don't get too big for your boots. It's only natural for you to earn money for Kyle's sake. Just be grateful you have someone like him.
Finally, my mother-in-law, forgetting that my mother and the counselor were present, began to yell at me.
What's going on? I'm clearly being tormented here. Why did I marry someone like this? Someone who won't even stand up for me when I'm being bullied by his mother? I married the worst kind of guy.
When I said that, Kyle retorted, like you. Calling me the worst? Don't mess with me. You're lucky to be married to a catch like me. It's only natural you'd serve me. I can't stand this charade anymore. This hospital bill is such a waste of money. I don't have money to waste on you. Just come back home. Kyle shouted this, and my mother-in-law chimed in like, exactly. You've been hospitalized for days. How much is that gonna cost? We were just thinking of letting you stay at home during the summer because you said you'd obey and follow me. Kyle laughed along and added, like, too bad, because you opposed Mom, your bedroom turned back into the barn. The counselor, who had been silently listening, exclaimed, like, you had her sleep in a barn during this scorching summer? Caught off guard, the two stammered, like, well, she was being rebellious. They desperately began to make excuses, but it was already too late. Then, my mother was like, what do you mean by making my daughter sleep in the barn? She confronted my mother-in-law and Kyle with those words. Turning to the counselor, my mother inquired, like, you've been recording all of this conversation, right? The counselor had mentioned at the beginning that the sessions would be recorded for future reference. The counselor affirmed, like, of course. Upon hearing this, Kyle and my mother-in-law began trembling and mumbled, like, we're sorry. In a pitiable tone. But this was just the beginning. Shall we go for the finishing blow? I announced everyone, like, I remember everything. Kyle and my mother-in-law jumped up, exclaiming, like, we're so sorry. We repent. Please spare us any more of this. They were begging for forgiveness. But why should I forgive? I explained to everyone why I ended up being hospitalized. Back then, I was utterly brainwashed by the two of them. Even though I was initially tormented after our marriage, they'd be kind to me afterwards. I was relied on. Gradually, I began to feel that these two couldn't manage without me. With such a mindset, it's strange how I started to follow their every command. I was told not to contact my real parents, and I obeyed that without a second thought. More importantly, even when I was mistreated, I never felt that the treatment was unjust. Then came the day of the accident. Kyle would always come to my workplace, partly to keep an eye on me. But that day, by chance, he saw me greet my boss, Mr. Johnson. On the way home, inside the car, he yelled me, like, were you always flirting with other men besides me, like you did just now? In a fit of rage, he pulled the car over, tried to drag me out of it. Even though I resisted desperately, Kyle pushed me so hard that I hit my head against the guardrail and fell onto the road. Ignoring me lying there, he drove away. Luckily, a passerby called an ambulance, and I was safely taken to the hospital. The reason for Kyle's smug smile when he realized I had lost my memory was his relief that it wouldn't be revealed that he was responsible for the accident. They probably came to the hospital not to visit me but to make sure I hadn't regained my memory. It happened on a major street. There are plenty of security cameras. If they check, they'll surely find footage of Kyle pushing me. If I report this to the police, Kyle will likely face charges. Frantically, Kyle pleaded, like I didn't mean any harm. I was just jealous. I'll treat you right from now on, Hazel. Please forgive me. You wouldn't want me to get arrested, right? Unfortunately for him. After the accident and the temporary memory loss, the brainwashing had been completely undone. I calmly told Kyle, like, sadly, I no longer have any feelings for you. In fact, I genuinely hope you get arrested. Reflect on your actions while serving your time. Also, let's get divorced. And yes, I'll be asking for compensation. Kyle crumpled to the ground, murmuring, like, no way. He was sobbing so intensely it was hard to believe a grown man could cry that much. My mother-in-law, even at this point, yelled, like, who do you think allowed you to live in our house all this time, you ungrateful woman? But in reality, it was me who had been feeding them with my salary.
You've been living off my paycheck all this time, haven't you? I cooked, did laundry, cleaned, everything. I won't be fooled anymore. Maybe, before you scold me, you should think about how you're gonna survive from now on.
With that, it seemed reality finally hit my mother-in-law. She stammered. Words escaped her as she broke down. Soon after, the police arrived due to my call and took Kyle away. During the investigation, he apparently admitted to his crime without any resistance. A few weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I immediately visited a law firm. I successfully divorced Kyle and managed to get a lump sum as compensation for the harm. I was advised to change both my workplace and residence for safety, so I got a new job at an accounting firm run by a colleague of Mr. Johnson. My mother and I moved near this new workplace. I never dreamed I'd be caught up with such a weird man and be brainwashed, but it's an experience nonetheless. I vowed to be strong and not let anyone manipulate me like that again, to truly live my life for myself.